Imagine living alone for 12 long years in the mountains of Montana, where the wind has a voice and the silence can break a man before the world ever does. Jack Dawson, a former Marine running from his own past, thought nothing in this life could surprise him anymore. But that was before the morning his German shepherd, Kaiser, growled at the fence line. Before Jack followed him and found a young woman collapsed in the grass, bleeding, terrified, whispering with her last breath, "Please, don't take me back." From that moment, nothing was the same. Who was she? What was she running from? And why did danger follow her all the way into Jack's quiet, forgotten world? This is not just a story about fear. It's a story about courage, healing, and the miracle of meeting the right person at the exact moment life falls apart. If this journey moves you even a little, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps these stories reach more hearts. And thank you, truly, for watching. Your support means more than you know. Montana's mountain air had a way of cutting through a man's lungs. Cold, sharp, and honest. The early morning mist clung to the tall pine trees, drifting low across the rocky slopes like a pale river. High above the small town of Cold Creek, perched on a lonely ridge where the wind carried the smell of wet soil and distant storms, stood Jack Dawson's cabin. For 12 silent years, it had been the only place where he felt his heartbeat slow down. Jack Dawson, a 52-year-old former Marine, moved with the quiet steadiness of a man who had lived too long with ghosts. He stood around 6 feet tall, built with the sturdy frame of someone who had spent decades training his body to obey before his mind could hesitate. His face was carved by sun, cold, and old memories, deep lines at the corners of his gray-blue eyes, a rough jaw shadowed by salt and pepper stubble, and a thin, healing scar across his cheekbone from a skirmish he never talked about. His brown hair, now touched with silver, was cropped short out of habit. He wasn't unfriendly, but solitude had become his armor. People talked too much. The mountains never did. At his side trotted Kaiser, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat and alert amber eyes that never missed a movement. Kaiser had once served as a Navy K-9, trained in search and rescue and high-risk operations. A faint scar along his flank told the story of the mission that ended both his and Jack's careers. The dog's posture was always slightly forward, like he was prepared to leap into action even during peace. Despite his intimidating build, Kaiser was gentle with Jack, loyal, attentive, and in many ways the only presence that kept Jack rooted in the world. Their mornings rarely changed. Jack brewed strong black coffee, Kaiser curled at his feet. Then they walked the property perimeter, a habit Jack kept from years in the Marines. Routine brought calm. Routine left no room for thinking too much. But today, something felt wrong. The wind was sharper than usual, carrying the metallic bite of approaching cold. Kaiser's ears lifted before Jack noticed anything. The dog stood taller, staring toward the far fence line that bordered the dense stretch of pine forest. Jack lowered the mug from his lips. "What is it, boy?" Kaiser didn't bark. He growled, deep, low, warning. Then he took off, paws pounding the damp ground as he sprinted toward the fence. Jack set the coffee down and followed, his boots sinking into patches of soft earth. The fog parted in drifting ribbons as he walked, revealing more of the quiet land, fallen pine needles, wild grass, and the long wooden fence stretching across the slope like a forgotten boundary. Kaiser stopped abruptly at one of the weathered posts. Jack joined him, breath steady, eyes scanning. Then he saw it. A streak of dried, rusty blood ran across the wood. not animal blood. The smear was too high, the color wrong. A drag mark led from the post into the tall grass. Jack crouched down. The blood was cold, but not old. Maybe a few hours at most. He rubbed it between his fingers and felt the tension settle in his chest like a returning old friend. For 12 years, nothing and no one had crossed his land. Not like this. "Someone's hurt," he murmured. Kaiser sniffed along the ground, nose tracing a faint, uneven trail. His tail stiffened. He looked back at Jack as if asking permission. Jack nodded once. "Lead." Kaiser moved slowly, ears sharp, body tense. Jack followed, rifle slung across his shoulder, boots brushing aside grass heavy with dew. The morning light grew brighter, cutting through the mist, and ahead Jack saw something, a shape on the ground, unmoving. As he approached, the shape became a person. A young woman lay curled near the fence line where the grass grew tallest. Her light gray hoodie was torn at the side, soaked with dried blood. Mud streaked her jeans. Her hair, a messy blend of light brown and gold, was tangled across her face. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with delicate features now dulled by exhaustion and pain. Her skin, pale beneath the dirt, hinted at someone who had not eaten or slept properly for days. Jack knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, she looked up. Her eyes were green, sharp even through the haze of fear and dust. She tried to speak, but her first breath cracked. The second formed a whisper so fragile Jack had to lean close to hear it. "Please, don't let them take me back." Her voice wasn't lying. It was pleading, terrified, broken. Jack scanned the horizon. No movement, no engines, no shadows, but his instincts prickled. Danger never arrived alone. He looked at her trembling fingers, at the blood soaked into the fabric of her hoodie, at the raw determination it must have taken for her to reach his land. Whoever she was, trouble had driven her here with teeth bared. He slid one arm under her shoulders, the other beneath her knees. She was lighter than he expected. Too light, the kind of light that came from fear and hunger. Kaiser walked ahead, clearing the path back toward the cabin. Inside, Jack laid her carefully on the narrow cot near the window. The warm scent of old wood and faint coffee filled the room, a stark contrast to the storm that lived in her eyes. Kaiser stood guard by the door, gaze fixed and protective. Jack fetched a basin of warm water, a clean cloth, and a small bottle of antiseptic. He worked quietly, gently cleaning the dirt from her wound, while she clenched the blanket in silent pain. Up close, he noticed more. Scratches on her arm, bruises along her ribs, signs of someone who had been running far too long. When she finally opened her eyes again, they were clearer but still rimmed with fear. She whispered, "Thank you." Jack nodded once. "You're safe for now." But even as he said it, instincts whispered otherwise. Somewhere beyond the trees, trouble was already closing in. Emily Carter woke to the faint glow of morning seeping through the small cabin window, the light softening the rough wooden walls around her. The air carried the gentle warmth of rising steam from a mug of coffee Jack had set on a small table beside the cot. The scent blended with the earthy smell of old timber and cold mountain air pushing through the cracked window frame. For a long moment, she lay still, her breathing slow and uneven as her mind fought to piece together where she was and why she hurt. Kaiser lay curled at the foot of the cot, his strong black and tan body rising and falling with each breath, but his amber eyes were open, trained on her, cautious yet calm. Emily finally pushed herself up on one elbow. She looked young, mid-20s, with hair the color of wheat touched by sunlight, though now tangled and darkened with dried dirt. Her face was pale from exhaustion, framed by freckles along her cheeks, and her green eyes were rimmed red from days of fear and lack of sleep. She was dressed in the same torn gray hoodie and mud-stained jeans Jack had found her in. There was a quiet strength in her expression, a stubbornness beneath the fear, like someone used to holding on long after others would have let go. Jack entered the room, carrying a folded towel and a metal bowl of warm water. He moved with the slow, deliberate steps of a man who had learned never to startle the wounded. "You're awake," he said, voice low but steady. Emily nodded, her fingers curling into the blanket. Where am I?" "My cabin," Jack replied. "Up in the Cold Creek Ridge. You're safe for now." His appearance in the morning light made him look even more weathered. Broad shoulders still firm beneath a faded flannel shirt, stubble thick along his jaw, and brows set in that calm but guarded expression Emily instinctively trusted. His gray-blue eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much, but refused to let it break him completely. Jack set the bowl on the table. "I need to clean your wound again. It'll hurt, but it'll help." Emily flinched slightly when he lifted her hoodie to check the bandage, the gash on her side still angry and swollen, but she didn't pull away. "I'm used to pain," she whispered. Jack paused at that, glancing up at her. Something in her voice reminded him of the villages he had walked through as a Marine, places where people learned strength because the world gave them no choice. Memories he had tried to bury stirred behind his eyes, but he blinked them away. Kaiser moved closer, resting his head gently on Emily's knee. She tensed at first, but when the dog let out a soft huff, she relaxed her hand onto his fur. "He's trying to comfort you," Jack said. "He's sweet," Emily murmured, her fingers brushing Kaiser's ear. "Only to the ones he trusts," Jack replied, "and that's not many." Emily looked around the cabin, taking in the handmade shelves, the sparse but tidy arrangement, the stack of chopped firewood near the stove. Everything simple, functional, but lived in. "You live here alone?" Jack nodded once. "Just me and Kaiser now." She swallowed, gaze drifting downward. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring trouble." "Trouble came before you stepped on my land," Jack said firmly. "Now tell me who hurt you." Emily hesitated. A tremor ran through her fingers as she twisted the blanket. Jack didn't push. He simply sat back on the small wooden chair, waiting with the patience of a man who understood trauma needed space. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "My family, we owned a patch of land near Silver Mesa. It didn't seem like much from the outside. Just dirt, rocks, and a broken trailer. But underneath was lithium. Rich and deep." Her voice thinned. "We didn't even know at first. A geologist friend ran a few tests, simple ones. Then everything changed." She told him about Silver Ridge Extraction Company, a private corporation with too much money and too few morals, and about Cole Maddox, the site manager, a tall man in his early 40s, with dark blonde hair always slicked back, a clean-shaven jaw, and cold gray eyes that never smiled. He wore expensive outdoor gear and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. Rumors around town said he had been fired from a previous mining outfit for aggressive tactics, though no official documents ever surfaced. Emily described him as charismatic on the outside, but predatory in the way he listened, calculating, always deciding who could be used and who could be removed. When he found out about the lithium, Emily continued, voice cracking, "He sent men to force my family to sign away the land. They came at night. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to erase anyone who knew the truth. Jack's jaw tightened. He remembered this pattern all too well. Power paired with unchecked greed. Emily's hands trembled as she pressed them to her lap. I ran when I shouldn't have survived. I heard them say they'd finish the job, so no one talks. Silence settled heavy in the cabin. Jack stood, his posture straighter than before. His old instincts surged. The protective ones. The ones that once drove him to lead teams through war-torn streets to shield civilians. "You're safe here," he said again. But this time, he wasn't trying to reassure her. He was making a promise. Kaiser lifted his head, ears alert. Emily reached for Jack's hand without thinking. "Please, don't let them take me back." Jack met her green eyes and saw the same fear he once saw in families overseas, the kind he never forgot. "You're not going back to them," he said quietly. "Not while I'm standing." Outside, the wind shifted. A warning, an omen. But inside the cabin, something else shifted too. Emily's. Fear eased just enough for hope to breathe. Jack Dawson moved quietly across the wooden floorboards of his cabin, his steps steady and measured as he lifted the old rug near the center of the room. Beneath it lay a square trap door, worn, creaking, and used so rarely that even Kaiser paused, ears twitching, as if reminded of memories he didn't quite understand. Jack pulled the handle and the panel rose with a soft groan, revealing a narrow ladder descending into a small storage chamber he had built years ago. It wasn't meant for people, but desperate moments created new purposes. Emily stood nearby, hugging her arms around herself. Her wheat blonde hair, now a bit cleaner from the warm cloth Jack had given her, fell slightly across her eyes. She looked exhausted, but more aware than the day before. "Down there?" she asked softly. "Only until I check the ridge," Jack replied. "Just to be safe." Emily hesitated, glancing into the dim space below. The fear in her green eyes wasn't the frantic terror from before. It had settled into something quieter, but no less heavy. Jack recognized that kind of lingering fear. Trauma didn't leave quickly. It waited in corners. "Kaiser will stay right at the door," Jack added. "He won't let anything happen to you." Kaiser, hearing his name, stepped forward and nudged Emily's leg with his snout. The gesture was gentle but protective, as if assuring her he was more than capable of guarding the hatch. Emily took a breath and descended the ladder. Jack lowered the trapdoor slowly, letting the darkness swallow her from sight, then repositioned the rug above it. Kaiser immediately settled beside the door, paws crossed, body tense but still. His amber eyes tracked Jack's movements with intelligence shaped by years of training. Jack grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. The afternoon light slanted across the ridge, turning the tall grass into shifting gold. The air held the crisp bite of early winter, and the sky hovered in that pale gray shade that made the mountains look harder, sharper, less forgiving. Jack walked toward the tree line, leaving Kaiser behind for the first time in months, but necessity had carved new rules. The ground near the forest edge told a story he didn't want to read. Fresh tire tracks pressed into the dirt, wide, heavy, likely from an off-road pickup. Beside them lay cigarette butts, crushed hastily, and footprints that suggested more than one man had been pacing the area. Jack crouched, touching the churned-up soil. Someone had knelt here, searching. Someone had lingered. Someone was close. Jack's jaw tightened. He hated this feeling, the same coil of tension he used to carry overseas. It wrapped around his ribs now, squeezing memory into breath. He didn't want violence again. He had lived enough for multiple lives, but walking away from Emily would hollow him out in ways he couldn't accept. He brushed dirt from his fingers and stood. The silence around him was too thick, too focused. In the Marines, they called it the quiet before impact, the moment everything held its breath. Jack didn't like the stillness now. The next 3 days unfolded with uneasy rhythm. Each morning, Jack left the cabin early and walked deep into the woods, deliberately leaving misleading tracks, doubling back, crossing streams, circling the ridge, to confuse any pursuers. His steps were purposeful, methodical, as if he were laying a map meant only to deceive. Kaiser remained behind, the loyal sentinel. He spent most of his time sitting or lying across the trapdoor, occasionally rising to sniff the air or glance out the window. Though he didn't bark, his muscles stayed tense. He was ready for danger long before danger appeared. Emily, no longer confined to the trapdoor except when Jack requested it, moved carefully around the cabin. She swept the floor, rinsed cups, and started the morning coffee in the dented metal pot Jack barely used anymore. Despite her injuries, she insisted on helping, her way of reclaiming control after days of terror. With each quiet task, she seemed less like a fugitive and more like a person rediscovering the world. Sometimes she paused at the window, watching for Jack's return. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also something else, an emerging trust she didn't have the strength to voice yet. The cabin slowly changed, too. Jack found himself talking more, short, simple sentences, but more than he had spoken aloud in years. Emily laughed once at something he said about Kaiser stealing socks as a puppy, a soft breath of sound that made Jack turn toward her in surprise. It had been a long time since laughter lived inside the cabin. Still, the threat outside never faded. Each evening, Jack checked the perimeter. Once he found a broken twig. Another time, a boot impression softened by rain. Nothing direct, nothing immediate, but enough to confirm the hunters were closing the distance inch by inch. One night, as Emily stirred a pot of soup Jack taught her to heat on the old stove, Kaiser suddenly stood, ears erect, staring at the door. Emily froze with the ladle in hand. "Is something out there?" she whispered. Jack stopped mid-step, listening. Only silence answered. Silence too deep, silence too precise. He moved to the window and peered into the darkening tree line. Nothing moved. No wind, no animals. But Emily felt it too. The invisible pressure, the tightening air. The threat wasn't at the door yet, but it was somewhere nearby, searching, waiting. In the small cabin on the ridge, the three of them, an ex-Marine, a wounded girl, and a loyal dog, stood together in a quiet that no longer felt peaceful. Danger was coming. It was only a matter of time. The storm arrived without warning, rolling over the Montana ridge like a dark, growling beast. Rain hammered the roof of the cabin in relentless sheets, each drop loud enough to mask even the sound of footsteps outside. Except Jack Dawson didn't trust storms to hide anything. He stood near the window, the lantern extinguished, the cabin swallowed in darkness. Kaiser paced once, twice, then froze, amber eyes narrowing toward the slope below. Headlights cut through the rain. A black pickup crawled across the lower ridge, its engine rumbling low and controlled, like the driver wanted to be heard only by those who were meant to hear. The truck stopped, idled, then slowly pulled forward again, circling the base of Jack's hill as if taking measure of the land. Jack's breath tightened. They found the ridge. He moved quickly but silently. Emily, who had been resting on the cot with a blanket around her shoulders, sat up at the urgency in his voice. Her face was still pale, her freckles darker under the dim blue light drifting through the window. "Jack, what's happening?" "Truck below the hill," he said, checking the place. Fear spread across her face like a shadow. She stood, her posture instinctively small, arms wrapping around her stomach. "No, please, not again." Jack lifted the rug and pulled open the trapdoor. "Down you go, now!" Emily climbed down without protest this time. Her green eyes shimmered with dread as the dim light from above framed her face. Kaiser moved to the opening and lay across the boards the moment Jack shut the trapdoor, his muscular body forming a living barrier. Jack extinguished the last candle and settled beside the cold stove. The cabin plunged into nearly perfect darkness. Only the storm's violent breathing filled the room. Emily trembled under the floor, one hand gripping the blanket, the other pressed to her mouth to keep her breaths quiet. Above her, Jack sat motionless, listening, every nerve sharpened. The door and windows rattled from the wind, but Jack ignored that. He focused on the subtle things, the slowing engine outside, the brief clicks of metal when someone opened a door, the crunch of boots on wet gravel. Kaiser didn't growl. He stared into the dark with laser focus, ready to launch himself at anything that breached the cabin. For an hour, the truck lingered below, circling, pausing, circling again, never committing, but never leaving. It was a message. We're close. Eventually, the engine revved, tires splashing through mud, and the sound grew distant until it faded entirely into the storm. But Jack didn't move for a long while. Only when Kaiser finally lay down did he lift the trapdoor again. Emily climbed up, shivering from fear more than cold. The moment she stepped out, Jack stepped forward, steady hands on her shoulders. "You're all right?" he said. They didn't come up. Emily swallowed hard. The faint lantern light caught the tear trails on her cheeks. "How can you stay so calm?" she whispered. "Practice," Jack replied, but his eyes softened. "And because someone has to be." That night, neither of them slept. The storm eased near dawn, leaving the world gray and dripping. Emily sat wrapped in a blanket, Kaiser resting beside her with his head on her knee, her fingers buried in his fur. Jack stood by the window again, watching the quiet mountain valley, as if waiting for it to betray itself. By mid-morning, he had made his decision. He grabbed his jacket and hat from the wall. "I'm going into town." Emily shot to her feet so fast she nearly stumbled. "No!" Her voice cracked. "They'll see you. If they know I survived, they'll come back for you. For both of us." Jack turned toward her. His face was calm, but there was a deeper weight in his eyes, a determination forged long before they met. "They already know someone's helping you," he said. "Whether I stay or not won't change that." Emily shook her head, breath trembling. "Please, don't go. You don't owe me anything." Jack stepped closer, his voice low and firm. "You ran enough. Now someone needs to speak for what happened to your family. I'll talk to Sheriff Cole." Emily blinked, the name sparking confusion. "Sheriff Cole? Who is he?" "A decent man," Jack answered. "Late 50s, big fellow, gray beard, a bit round in the shoulders. He's been law here for 20 years. Doesn't scare easy." Jack remembered Sheriff Cole Harper well, a tall, broad man with sun-browned skin, thick silver beard, and steady brown eyes. He once served as a military police sergeant before settling in Cold Creek, and the job had carved discipline into his stride. Quiet, but fair. A man who hated corruption more than paperwork. Jack trusted him more than any lawman in the county. Emily's voice softened, almost breaking. "When you leave, I I don't feel safe without you here." The admission struck Jack harder than expected. He had spent years believing he brought comfort to no one. Yet here was someone who saw him not as a threat, not as a stranger, but as safety. Jack touched Kaiser's head. "Stay with her." Kaiser gave a low, understanding chuff. As Jack stepped out the cabin door, Emily stood in the doorway, blanket around her shoulders, watching him as if each step he took carried her farther from safety. Her green eyes glistened, not with fear, but with the ache of losing the only anchor she'd found since her world shattered. For the first time since arriving, she understood something frighteningly simple. Jack Dawson wasn't just protecting her. He was the only person who made her feel like she still had a future. The morning sun climbed slowly over the Montana Ridge, casting long bands of gold across the open valley as Jack Dawson rode into town on his dusty old pickup. Rain from the night before still clung to the road in shallow puddles, reflecting the sky like broken mirrors. The town of Cold Creek was small, only one main street lined with wooden storefronts, an old diner with fading red paint, and the sheriff's office built of stone that looked older than half the residents. As Jack parked outside the station, he took a steady breath. He hadn't walked into this building in years, not since he left the world behind. But some things couldn't be avoided anymore. Sheriff Cole Harper stepped outside as Jack approached, as if sensing the gravity in the air. Harper was in his late 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with weathered skin the color of old leather and a thick, silver-flecked beard that framed his stern mouth. His brown eyes were sharp but not unkind, the eyes of a man who had seen the best and worst of people and chose to remain decent anyway. His khaki uniform fit snugly around a chest, still muscular from years of work, and his utility belt sat perfectly balanced. A man who believed in order, precision, and truth. "Jack Dawson?" Harper said, voice deep, carrying the echo of the military discipline that had shaped him long before he became sheriff. "Haven't seen you in too long." Jack nodded, wiping the wind from his eyes. "Got something you need to hear. And it won't wait." Inside the station, Jack told him everything. How he found Emily Carter, the wound at her side, the lithium discovery on her family's land, and the men who wanted her dead. Harper listened without interrupting, leaning forward with his thick hands clasped on the desk. When Jack finished, the sheriff let out a long breath. "I knew that mining company smelled wrong," Harper muttered. "But this is a damn crime scene." He stood, grabbing his hat. "Let's go. I'm bringing the whole team." Deputies arrived, 3 of them, each dressed in forest green jackets with county sheriff stitched across the back. They were simple, hard-working men. Daniel Briggs, a tall, bearded deputy with kind hazel eyes and a calm tone. Luis Carter, short and stocky with close-cropped black hair and a thoughtful, observant stare. And Hank Willis, lanky, rail-thin, with a chestnut mustache and a nervous energy that made him tap his fingers constantly. They checked their gear, loaded radios, and followed Jack back up the mountain road. At the cabin, Emily waited anxiously on the porch with Kaiser by her side. Her wheat-blonde hair was tied loosely behind her head, and though her face was still drawn from worry, her green eyes brightened at the sight of Jack. Kaiser bolted toward the truck the moment Jack stepped out, circling him, tail raised, as if inspecting him for wounds. "You made it back," Emily said, breath shaky. Jack gave a small nod. "Told you I would." Sheriff Harper approached Emily gently. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm sorry for what you've been through." But I promise you, we're going to fix this. Emily told her story again, this time formally, slowly, the truth spilling out in clear but trembling words. The deputies listened, their expressions shifting from shock to outrage to grim resolve. It took only 2 hours for Harper to secure warrants. By afternoon, law enforcement stormed the Silver Ridge extraction site. Cole Maddox was arrested beside his office trailer, still wearing his branded black windbreaker, his blonde hair slicked back as always. His cold gray eyes narrowed when he saw the deputies, but for the first time, he wasn't the one in control. 2 of his men were found hiding near the equipment shed. Another tried to flee but was caught within minutes. Their weapons were seized, their radios confiscated, and their operations shut down under state investigation. By evening, the truth was no longer buried. Harper returned to the cabin with a look Jack couldn't quite read, something between triumph and sorrow. "It's done," the sheriff said. "The land is yours again, Emily. But I'm sorry about what happened to your family." Emily lowered her gaze, clutching the edge of her blanket. "There's no home left to go back to," she whispered. Harper nodded, stepped back to give her space, and left Jack's property with his deputies. Silence settled over the ridge, heavy but strangely gentle. The danger had passed, yet the weight of everything lingered. Over the days that followed, Emily remained at Jack's cabin. The wound at her side healed slowly under Jack's care. She began to help more around the property, sweeping the porch, boiling water for coffee, feeding Kaiser his morning meal. Kaiser followed her everywhere, nudging her hand whenever she seemed lost in thought. One warm afternoon, sunlight spilled across the porch where Jack and Emily stood together. Kaiser lay stretched between them, eyes half closed in contentment. The valley below breathed in soft shades of green and gold. Emily turned to Jack, voice soft and steady. "You saved me, not just from them, but from the fear that was eating me alive." Jack looked out over the mountains, his mountains, the place he hid for 12 long years. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "saving someone else is the only way to save yourself." She smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. The quiet didn't feel lonely. The world felt possible again. And in the fading light, with Kaiser leaning gently against both of their legs, 3 wounded souls stood on the porch. Not broken, but beginning. Sometimes, the miracles we wait for don't arrive as flashes of light in the sky. Sometimes, they walk toward us quietly, in the shape of a wounded girl seeking help, a loyal dog standing guard, or a lonely man finally understanding the purpose behind all his pain. In this story, Jack thought he had run away from the world, but God had a different plan. He brought Emily to Jack's doorstep not by accident, but as a reminder that even the most broken hearts can still be used to save another. And in doing so, they saved themselves. Life isn't always loud with miracles. Often God whispers them into the ordinary. A stranger who chooses kindness, a moment of courage we thought we didn't have, an unexpected bond that heals the wounds we hide. Every day, each of us is given a chance to be a shelter for someone, to stand up for what's right, to choose compassion over silence. May this story remind you that no matter how dark the path seems, God never leaves us wandering alone. He places the right people in our lives, at the right time, for reasons we may not understand until later. And that itself is a miracle. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with someone who might need a little hope today. Leave a comment to tell us where you're watching from, or share a blessing for someone else in need. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so these stories of faith, courage, and quiet miracles can reach more souls seeking comfort. May God bless you, protect your family, and fill your days with peace, just as He watched over Jack, Emily, and Kaiser on that lonely mountain. Amen.